There was a woman who lived in London, and she had so much money that she had everything that she thought she would need, but still she wasn't happy. She thought that as a woman she would be able to do more, but she wasn't allowed, not by the way that the country was run. She would have to do as she was told by her husband, and she decided that one thing that she could do would be to write. She'd always liked putting pen to paper. As she read through the newspapers, she looked and she could see there were always articles about Florence Nightingale. She'd returned from the Crimean War some 40 years before, but nobody had written a full biography of her, and she decided that that was what she was going to do. She knew where Florence Nightingale lived, and she knew how to get there, and she was going to go and knock upon her door, and she knew that she would be able to talk to Florence Nightingale. Talk to her about the things that she'd done about nursing, how she'd worked with all of the doctors, how she'd developed nursing in Britain. And she went over to the dusty old house that Florence Nightingale lived in, and she knocked upon the door. The door was eventually opened by a servant. "Hello, ma'am, can I help you? What is it you want?" "I would wish to talk with the mistress of the house, Mistress Nightingale. I would wish to talk to her so that I could interview her and I could write a story about her, the true story of what happened to her when she was in the Crimea." The servant looked at this rich woman at the door and said, "I don't think that the mistress would like to talk to you. She hasn't been out of her house for many years, and I'll put you in a parlour and I'll have a word with the mistress and see if she wants to talk to you." This rich woman was quite surprised. "Not wish to talk to me? But I would write a fine biography of what she has done and what she has seen." But she was led into the parlour, and in the parlour there was a coal fire. It was banked up. It was roaring. And she watched the fire, and it got lower and lower, and still she waited and waited, and soon she wondered whether it would be right and proper for her to get out of her chair and put some more coal under the fire. But the maid came back into the parlour and said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but I do not think that Mistress Nightingale wishes to see you. Not anyone." The rich woman couldn't believe it. "Not see me?" The maidservant was tall, and she was strong, and she walked right over to the door and opened it and said, "I bid you good day, and I hope that you have some luck. But now the mistress needs to sleep." When she went outside, the rich woman thought about it. Ever since Florence Nightingale had returned as a hero, as a heroine, people had wanted locks of her hair, had wanted to take her photograph, had wanted to have her signature, had wanted letters, had wanted anything that belonged to her. They wanted to take photographs of her so that they could put them onto teacups, teapots, plates, tiles, commemorative plaques. For a great industry had grown up around Florence Nightingale, and people were making money from her image and the things that she said. And perhaps that's why Florence Nightingale had taken to a bed and had stayed inside and had not gone out. But the rich woman was not going to be stopped. She was determined. So she wrote a letter. "Mistress Nightingale, I would wish to speak with you. I would wish to give a true and honest picture of you and all of your works." But the letters would be returned. She kept on writing. She kept on writing, and one day a letter landed upon a doormat, and with excited fingers she reached towards it and she tore it open. She could tell by the address at the top that it was from Florence Nightingale herself, and the words were fair but harsh. "If you would wish to find out what it was like to do the things that I have done, then I would suggest that you get yourself along to St. Thomas's Hospital and work there. I would suggest that you clean the floors, tend to the soldiers who are returning now from the war in South Africa. It was true. A war had raged ever since 1899 in the Boer War. She was quite surprised that Florence Nightingale had said to her that she should work in the hospital, almost as a servant. But she did want to write this book. She went down upon her knees, and when she worked inside of the hospital, she scrubbed the floor with carbolic soap. In all of this world, she had everything that she thought she would need, but she had everything except Florence Nightingale's book on modern nursing. But she was learning the hard way. She would check the soldiers who would return from South Africa. She would give them clean water. She would give them fresh food. She would talk to them. And perhaps it was this that made those soldiers feel much better. She would keep them warm and clean, and still she would always be willing to get down upon her hands and knees, and her fingers that had once been so clean and white and like porcelain were now hard and calloused. But she learnt a lot about the way that people talk and how to care for people, just as Florence Nightingale had found out. She did receive a letter, and she wasn't sure, but when she'd been working inside of the hospital, she'd seen someone who looked like the servant, tall and strong, who was watching her as she worked. And the letter that she received this time from Florence Nightingale said this: "Please come to my home, and I will give you something that you will truly need." She was very excited. She thought that she was going to get an interview with Florence Nightingale so that she could write her book. But when she got there, once again she was shown to the parlour, and she watched the fire and she waited, but not so long. When she looked out of the window, she could see a figure with a dark dress on and a white cap upon its head, and a figure that did not move very swiftly, bent at its back, but laying something down on a bench by the side of a tree in the garden. When the figure had returned into the house, the servant came and said, "Mistress has left something for you outside. Left it for you by the tree." She went to the tree, and sure enough, there was a book, a guide to modern nursing, as written by Florence Nightingale. But when she flicked open the cover, she could see that it had been signed by Florence herself. And in it was written, "From one determined woman to another." Now she had everything that she ever needed. She had the book, and money and wealth, and she used it well, for she sent the money to the School of Nursing, and she helped others to learn about nursing, just as Florence, just as she had learned.